I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to Calibrate Real Estate on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We're everywhere. Our guest expert today, Norris, Vice President of Market Insights at PropertyRadar. I had to ask Aaron, I was like, what's PropertyRadar? And he said that basically they're experts at transforming property records and demographic research for realtors. So I think this is going to be a great discussion for all the folks out there in our Calibrate crew that are in the real estate profession, that are out there showing houses, they're out there building farms, building databases. You're going to need to tune into this, and you'll probably dial it back a few times to re-listen to certain parts of it. Aaron, welcome to our show.
Nice to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so thanks so much for being available for our podcast audience. You know, the Calibrate crew, I hear from a lot of different people, and usually people are listening in over the weekend as they're either showing houses or getting stuff ready for the upcoming week. And I think that what happens for real estate agents when you're out of the office, you tend to think a little bit more about, how do I generate more leads? How do I generate the right type of leads? How do I continue to build upon my farm? There are all these just different thoughts when we're not sitting there answering email. And I love the process of either going on my morning run or being in the car driving somewhere and just kind of thinking about, all right, well, how do I make my business better? And at the beginning of 2021, I think most people are feeling like they either want to double down and create additional success that there's building off of what they did this past year, or they really feel like they need to reset and be serious about the data around their business. So what does PropertyRadar do for realtors? And let's talk about the 3-day trial and then the community that you have, but just how you help realtors really stop being in the weeds, if you will, with the data, which I think a lot of us really struggle with.
Sure. You know, PropertyRadar is a software service, monthly fee to get access to creating your own lists. We've got over 200 fields in property, mortgage, people data, to where whatever niche you decide to focus on, we help you crush it. So you're spending less marketing dollars, talking more often to the right people that most likely are going to do business with you. So it's a beautiful tool. I was a longtime customer before I came on board, as they went nationwide. So it's been a really fun journey in the technology space. And my background's in PR and marketing, and this kind of information data isn't just for Wall Street anymore. So our industry is typically terrible at technology. Let's be really honest. So part of my mission is to get small businesses, not just realtors, to realize that this data is available and dream about the possibilities. Because oftentimes the biggest mistake I see is they don't know it exists.
I love it. And I think about the old Hair Club for Men commercials. And thankfully, both you and I have a nice head of hair, but you always loved when someone was a consumer of a product before they joined the brand. It seems like you're in our world of vaccines, you were inoculated by this program before you ever became a part of it, which I think is really important, actually, to be a beta tester, to be a part of the process before you actually start working in it as your day job. I believe you're correct. And I think that the conversation that we're going to have is that we all know as realtors that we need data. Data is very important, especially as it relates to finding people that own property. And sometimes it's very difficult to sort of uncover the real decision makers under corporate entities, under limited liability companies. My brokerage company, we do both residential and commercial. Our primary focus is selling apartment buildings, and there's a lot of partnerships where it makes it difficult to figure out exactly who is a part of a deal. So if I were to engage PropertyRadar, what does that experience look like as a subscriber, and how can some of the tools tactically really help me in my day-to-day business and help me sell more property? Frankly, that's what I think every realtor wants to do. Is we know that we're good at helping our clients, and we want to streamline and make efficiencies as it relates to the data part of our business.
I'll give you 2 examples. One sort of being somebody just getting started in the business hustling, and then we'll go to the apartment side, because it's so funny we're talking about this. I just created a video about that corporate entity side and finding out some information. So let's start with a local pro, brand new agent, trying to get their feet wet. They're driving around with a customer in the car, and maybe it's a teacher that's moving into town from another state. They're there for a week, and they're going to be moving in 6 months. They know that. So your job as a new realtor, drive them around town, give them the history, and they say, you know what, I really like that house. And you pull up Property Radar and you see who owns it, and you can call them from right there in the car. So that concept of like driving for clients, driving for dollars, if you will, that kind of information, phone numbers and emails are already in the system for that ownership piece of the real estate. Jump to, let's do let's do a real estate investor whose specialty is going after landlords. And you want to market to landlords over the age of 65, because landlords typically decide to be a little bit more passive as they age. And you want to talk to landlords that have also owned for over 15 years. So taking that ownership piece, you can contact them and market to them in a very specific way. Sometimes I've had real estate investors get to bid on an entire portfolio of a landlord's seller, carry back some really creative, interesting things because they approached it the right way. Now, on the apartment side and the LLC, that is a little different. Property Radar does not have owner information, and there's some tools out there that'll charge you $200 to $300 extra a month to have that information. But I'll send you a video of how to find that for free, often most times, to where you can find out who is associated with the entity and market to them at home instead of the business address, knowing that it's probably going to go through some gatekeeper. Why not market to them at home instead? So anyway, it's an interesting way to do some lookup searches one at a time. You can create a dynamic list. So that middle example of the real estate investor talking to people over 65, anytime somebody ages into that list, you can trigger technology to send out a postcard and a reminder for you to follow up in a week. There's just so many different ways to play with the data depending on your niche. So you throw something at me, I might give you some ideas.
Aaron, I love the resource of the video, and our podcast producer, Ann Russell, is going to drop that into the show notes when you send that to us, because I think that's going to be a great resource, a great way of helping people understand if they want to know more about Property Radar, that they'll have that. And I think the benefit of driving around, because it happens where a client just naturally, and I've been in the car, I've certainly been on the phone with someone when they're like, I just drove by a property, the bushes are overgrown and this and
Mhm.
that, and it feels like it might be a great opportunity to whether it's a fix and flip or just a remodel project. I'd like to know more about that. And I often am sitting there flat-footed saying, okay, gosh, I'll get back to the office, I'll go on county records, I'll go figure all this out, and have all that synchronized right there on your phone, where not only you know a bit about the owner, but you may be able to even contact them right on the spot. It feels like that would help us really reduce some missed opportunities, really.
Yeah, I grew up in the flipping business with my father, who had this concept of walking the comp as well, to where, the hardest sale is the first one. And once you've got the first one, you got to use the heck out of it. Walk it around the neighborhood, become that hyper local expert in a neighborhood. It's far easier just getting started in the business to focus on a niche that you're very excited and passionate about. And just really focus instead of getting distracted. And I don't know about you, when I refer somebody, I have realtors as an example that own mind share, free of rent, just because they own a category for me. Historic homes, I know exactly who I'm going to point you to, because they're going to make me look like a rock star, and they just murder that from a realtor perspective. Historic homes, luxury homes, first time buyer mortgage professionals. Like, so as you as a professional, one of the biggest mistakes I see is like they just don't know what they bring to the party. And they try to do everything. And as a marketer, when you're marketing to everyone, you market to no one. So the smaller the niche, the easier it is to find the data to where you're talking to less people more often, the follow-up piece. I think I got distracted from your question though. One more time.
No,
um,
you're doing great. I think it's a great segue into what I've heard you say, which is that people in our profession, specifically realtors, tend to fail when they try to be everything to everyone, or they try to be someone they're not, especially when they're getting started or when the market shifts. And so let's talk about targeted marketing, Aaron, and share what some do's and don'ts. I love to be super tactical
sure.
and very relatable to our Calibrate crew that's listening in. How can people avoid that trap, that failure that you talked about of trying to be everything to everyone and not being market segmented or market specialists?
We were talking about that overgrown lawn as an example. So say you're a realtor and you've got a listing, you've got an open house, and the next door neighbor's house just looks terrible. And while you're at the open house, you decide to look up the property information, find out who owns it, how long they've owned it, if it's got a mortgage in place, like what is going on. Maybe you walk around the neighbors and talk to them a little bit, get some information. But you as a realtor can try to tackle that. And that's not on anybody's lists. Nobody's going to farm that list. It's probably while some people might send a piece of direct mail to the site because they haven't paid attention, you're able to send a piece of mail to the actual owner directly addressed to them. So when you make a touch as a marketer, when it's that specific, how much faster can you bring them down the sales funnel because you've made a little bit more effort? It's not just a dear owner, you know, it's, hey, Susan, I held an open house next door. This is what it's listed for. Are you looking to list anytime soon? You know, Colorado has access, you know, exploded. We have so many people moving into town. You might be really surprised. And on the back end, you've seen exactly what they've owned, when they took out a mortgage, how much equity they're sitting on. You know, maybe it's just somebody who's stuck. Maybe it's somebody who inherited the home. All of a sudden, you become a problem solver. And you're not just a realtor thinking that having access to the MLS makes you, you know, a magic unicorn. So, you know, there's a lot of pressure in our industry to really differentiate and to prove the value that we bring to the table. And this is a great example of that.
Some good tactical examples of clients of yours that, and you mentioned, and I think it's really important for our Calibrate Crew audience to really understand that when you are in the real estate brokerage profession, people have this, I'm thinking of the old school Rolodex, this mental filing cabinet of, I think of this person as the historic home broker. I think of this person as the mid-century modern broker. I think of this person as the homestead neighborhood broker. And it's important to know that every single one of us, like it or not, has friends, family, neighbors that automatically have this go-to. If someone says, who's doing business in your neighborhood, it might be one or two people. And I've had the blessing of having that benefit me where I had friends that were wanting to move into our neighborhood, didn't know it. They were having dinner and drinks with other friends that already lived in the neighborhood. And they're like, we just love this area. What can we do to get in? And who do you think is like kind of the mover and shaker realtor that could help us? And they happened to mention me, and my friend was like, I know them. I played lacrosse with Kyle for 12 years or whatever. And that's sort of how it was communicated back to me. So it was a benefit, but there's probably plenty of times where I've sent too many messages and I've confused people. And as the author of Story Brand, Don Miller says, if you confuse, you'll lose. And I really like
Yep.
that tagline. It's Don's, it's not mine. So let's talk about that, confusing our clientele and maybe trying to share too many messages, and some of the clients of yours, Aaron, that really do it well, that sort of put that messaging right in our brain of, this is who I want you to think of when you're.
One of the things, there's a realtor down in San Diego had just moved there. Some of you may know Patrick Ferry of the, you know, the Ferry family, real estate trainers. He moved to a new town, and I did an interview with him a couple months ago. And he said when he moved to town, he was completely brand new and he was figuring out how to start business. And what he really decided to focus on was the buy side, one of the most difficult segments in the market, but really trying to help clients time. So, hey, I'm really looking to move in 3 months. It's such a tight market. I'm so scared. Everything's going so fast. And, you know, how do you compete in this market? So what he spent his time doing is marketing to people off market. There's this entire industry behind the scenes that nobody really talks about. And just for fun, I'll give you an example. I'm looking at data for Colorado last year, and off-market activity was up 35% last year. Regular sales was up 67%, but there's this entire world of off-market activity that people don't pay attention to. That could be real estate investors buying directly from a homeowner. It never hits the MLS. It could be iBuyers. You just never know what's going on behind the scenes and the millions of dollars you're missing out on. So what he was doing was just saying, "Hey, great, you're moving in 3 months. What are you looking for? 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom. Oh, you like that style? Great. You know, look for homes between 1930 and 1960." And all of a sudden, he created a marketing campaign, reaching out to those homeowners that fit the property criteria, the square footage, the number of bedrooms, the bathrooms, and, you know, trying to hit a style as best as possible. But, you know, dear Sally, I have somebody moving into town that absolutely loves this neighborhood. If you know anybody thinking of selling in the next couple months, I'd really appreciate a heads up. And by the way, I support local, you know, pet pet adoption agency. If you refer me something, I'll give $100 donation to this local pet charity. It's hyper local, it's personalized. How much more sticky is than a generic dear owner? And the fact that he was proactive, I own several rentals. I have only had it happen twice where a realtor did this. Immediately stuck in my mind, and maybe it's because it's me, I'm a marketer, but I was like, wow, they really went the extra mile for a client, trying to get ahead of it and going after stuff that's not on the MLS. And they targeted me correctly. There was a ton of equity. I bought it a long time ago. I was in the exact neighborhood that they wanted. I thought that was really, really cool. Now, from a branding perspective, has that realtor just proven to me that they're a hustler and they'll do anything for their buyers? I mean, selling, let's be honest, selling is definitely far easier, in my opinion, than the buyer side. So if you're willing to hustle like that for a buyer, what would you do for me as a seller? So it's almost like a twofer. So if you're really owning and backing into a niche in a neighborhood, I mean, that's great too, because it's extra marketing for you in the background. Hope that makes sense.
Aaron, it makes tons of sense. And you're absolutely correct that when we're marketing to sellers, they may be buyers at some point, either right away, you sell their house, you help them buy a new house, or if you're investors, I mean, that's the pot of gold, right? Most investors are collectors, and that's a part of the industry that I am really passionate about and have worked in for over 15 years now, where real estate investors, it's proof of concept, which is just a tenant of business that if this particular type of property works for them, they'll tend to amass some income, they'll amass some equity, they'll have the ability to buy more of that. And so it just tends to repeat itself. So it's really beneficial, I think, to be able to target people that way. So I love that you shared that about the Ferry family. And obviously Tom Ferry is very famous for his coaching industry. And that's just a really cool way of just seeing how someone can get ahead of what might be an inventory issue. And I love that story. I love it. Absolutely.
And for teams out there, for you brokers that control teams, some will do a good job sort of creating those in-house specialists. Maybe you've got a specialist that specializes in seniors because they know that they like to downsize. Maybe you have agents in other states that seniors are moving to. Maybe you really understand local rules and opportunities on loans and insurance and estate planning, to where you really become an industry expert. You're not just a realtor, you're almost like an estate planner. Um, so for that person on your team, you could send the heck out of postcards with active adults on the front and pitching yourself as like the active adult realtor in town. And you can hold webinars on, with the CPAs and insurance providers. And, that's just such a different market, but you can market to people just based on age. Is just a unique opportunity that people don't think about. We've talked about the historic homes. You can market based on the age of the property, and you cannot waste your money dropping mail to people who aren't ever going to see it. So that's the worst, when as a landlord I get mail, or it's clear that they're trying to reach the owner, but you know when I have a vacancy and I can see that they're dropping mail for me and something I'm never at, I'm like, you're wasting your money.
And it's one of the most frustrating things as a realtor that's plowing money into print marketing is you really have no validation of whether the person that was supposed to get it got it,
Mhm.
or as one of my former colleagues used to say, what's that countertop test of how long does the piece of mail sit on the countertop before it goes in the recycling bin, or as they're walking from the mailbox to the trash can in their garage to then inside their house, how long do they look at it? It might be 15 seconds, it might be 20 seconds. It's effectively a billboard in their hands.
Mhm.
And you have to have that really hit them right at the moment and hit it in the right way for them to really hold on to it. So I think all these are great ideas, great pointers.
I don't want to get you stuck on just the concept of direct mail too. So I want to touch on, because in the system there are phone numbers and emails, you can create lookalike audiences for digital marketing. So you can right bound market. You can have the best of direct inbound and outbound and really create a mix that fits your niche and just own it and back into it. So they're seeing impressions in multiple channels. So I call it right bound marketing. It's the right audience at the right time in the right channel with the right message. Uh, as a marketer, my job is to drive down, make the funnel more efficient. Back in the day, if you took a marketing class, you've heard of the rule of seven. It takes 7 impressions for a customer to do business with you. And depending on who you talk to these days, that has exploded because there's so much noise. So as a consumer, you're being bombarded with messages. I've heard up to even 73 impressions. Like, I don't have time for that. So as a marketer, how do I drive a consumer or a prospect or suspect down my sales funnel most efficiently as possible? And a big part of that is just talking to the right people with the right message. It makes it far stickier.
All right, right bound marketing. I want to make sure that if someone was driving or on their morning run, that they caught those four pieces, because I heard it and I was like, absolutely correct. So, what are those four steps that are important for any type of marketing, whether they're working with Property Radar or just someone's thinking about communicating to their sphere or their farm?
Of course, it's the right audience. When you have a niche, you can find that audience. When you have the right audience, you can refine your message to address their pain points more easily. The right channel. So if it's direct mail, if it's TikTok, I don't know, that's up to your niche. And then it's at the right time. So one of the things with the data point, like, why would you be marketing to somebody who just bought their house 6 months ago? Is that possibly a waste of money? Yeah, they might be interested in passing you on as a referral, but I don't know, is it worth it? But those are some decisions we need to make consciously to go, yeah, I might be able to save a couple hundred extra bucks, and that'll save money so I can send out another postcard next month. The biggest thing as marketers that we're not doing is the one and done. We communicate one time and then we stop.
Yeah. I think that that's so important for people to remember that when you're sending out any piece of marketing, whether it's by email, on social media, by snail mail, or if you're doing direct, one-on-one phone calls. I've got several folks in my company that do a lot of prospecting by phone because we have a database and we work with a lot of investors. So you've got to think about who your audience is, what your message is, the channel that you're going to be doing it. And that's what we were just talking about there a moment ago. And then the timing on all of that. Great reminders, super tactical, which is what we were always wanting to bring to our Caliber. We want to give you actionable things, regardless of whether you work with Aaron or myself. We just want to make sure that you're thinking about these things while you're contemplating spending money, spending time. And it's harder to tell which is more important, which is more valuable, your time or your money. But it's important to know that you've got finite resources that you're going to be putting towards marketing, and you should be doing it correctly. So great advice, Aaron. I want to take a step back. You mentioned your dad, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but our mission at Calibrate, the brokerage company, is we exist to help people create generational wealth through real
Mm.
estate. And that is something that is a phraseology now. It's a former career coach of mine named Chris really helped us live on this show create that. It was something I struggled with for 3 or 4 years as a business owner of like, let's get the mission right. And it took me a lot of different iterations. Beside the point, the point is let's talk about your dad a little bit and learning as a kid, as you had mentioned to me, that you helped him out with the fix and flip business. And what are some things that you observed as your dad was helping grow wealth and improve properties, improve the communities that he was owning real estate in?
One of the my mom and dad got married at 17. They were on food stamps. He has like one of the most incredible stories. Very working class families, both of them. Not necessarily an easy childhood, and he became a self-made millionaire. He is my hero, the ultimate hustler. He gives of himself so hard and is so extremely generous. Growing up fixing and flipping houses, I love the process of, I don't know how much I was helpful, but, as a kid, getting a free bowling ball, finding jelly that was made from the 1950s. I mean, it was an adventure of a lifetime. And the process of turning junk into something beautiful was always a hook. Now, I did not get into the real estate business right out of high school. I was a professional artist based out of New York City. So I was touring the world in my 20s, getting paid to be a professional actor. Um, I only came back to real estate by accident in New York City in between gigs. I was a gymnast as well, and spraining my ankle, I had to take a break from waiting tables, and I fell into Wall Street merger and acquisition presentations. When I fell into data, it was started my journey of marketing and PR. When my mom found out she had bone cancer in the mid 2000s, I decided to come back home. I completely switched gears, and I was about to go back to Wall Street when my dad's like, "Why don't you come work for me? I want to launch the California crash, which was a report basically telling our entire network, we're selling absolutely everything in California. This is about to go down, and you're going to be able to buy whatever you own now for half in a couple years. That put him on a, we're known for what, he was known for market timing. I helped him do that. I came on board. And that started our journey together. So we've created a ton of education. We launched a radio show. And to the legacy building piece, I actually changed the Norris Group's motto to creating wealth and legacy through real estate. It wasn't just about making money, is what you did with it. We launched an event, and this will all come together with Property Radar in just a second. In 2008, we launched I Survive Real Estate. It's still up, isurviverealestate.com. We've raised over $1 million for charity. What the concept was at the Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California, we brought together industry experts from all over the country in different facets of real estate to talk about the year ahead. And within a few years, we were getting experts from Zillow, the chief economist of Fannie Mae, and we put it up for free. It's on Amazon Prime now. You can see everything. It was just us giving back to the community, and those in the audience paid to be there. And it became sort of like a real estate investor ball here in California. And so this year we crossed the $1 million mark. But that's where I met Sean O'Toole. Sean O'Toole is the most requested guest. He is a tech nerd superstar. He created Foreclosure Radar that eventually became Property Radar. And he's just such a wealth of knowledge. And because he watched my work giving back in that way, that's how I ended up here today. So if you approach giving in an authentic way and you're doing it because it's just the right thing to do and it's part of your company culture, it comes back to you. I never thought that it would give back to me in such interesting ways that it has in life. It's just that's part of my life mission is service. And I've been extremely blessed because I've done that in many ways.
I love that story about your career, but then also how it intersects and works with your dad's career and your respect for your father, and that's just such a beautiful way to describe it. So thank you, Aaron. And as you talk about Sean and you talk about Property Radar, I think that there's a lot of realtors that really have access to data, even though they may not know where to go seek it. And we're talking about demographics that really give you some leading trends. And I'll just be the first one to share with you. I'm not sure what to look at. I'm not sure how to really see the data. And we're always being asked, especially if you become a high producing realtor, to forecast things. And I just feel frankly nervous because you feel like, okay, you're sort of being put on the spot to sort of bet on where the economy is going. And it probably shouldn't be so much of a bet. There is real analytical data out there in demographics. So I know that that's an area of expertise of yours. Any thoughts or ideas that you can share about how we can utilize demographics to help our profession?
Yeah, it's going to be such a different story depending on the real estate asset class as well. Even in commercial, if we dig down to the different property types, hotels and hospitality are going to have a very different run from industrial and commercial office space. Um, so depending on who's coming your way, it's just like, hey, here's the trend. If you're going into this, part of the deal of a lifetime are these interest rates. My dad refinanced his home at 17.5% in 1980 to become a full-time real estate investor. So for you millennials out there who roll your eyes and get all stressed out because interest rates have gone up 0.1%, it's crazy. So stop doing that. These are lifetime lows. And part of the deal right now, if you're working with clients, it's okay. Like if they're going in long and they're not trying to play real estate like the stock market, you're fine. It's dig into the trends based on the property type. I was thinking about a specific strategy for you since you're in the commercial space. And one of the biggest opportunities I see is upzoning. So last time I was in downtown Denver a few years ago, I was on the board of the Public Relations Society of America, and I was the chair of the Western District, and we had our conference in Colorado, and I hadn't been there in a few years. I don't think I've ever seen as many cranes downtown in my entire life. Um, so upzoning, a lot of cities are sort of recalibrating the mix and the usage of what they want, residential. And if you're that hyperlocal expert plugged in before it even reaches the realm of public record, you may know something that nobody else has. And maybe you've got these investor clients in the commercial space that love, for an example, commercial residential apartment buildings. And there's this rundown corner of office building that the city is rezoning in some fashion where they want density. You could start talking to those clients and say, this is an opportunity coming up. I think we should start trying to talk to this building owner, because this is about to go down and you could be the first there. That kind of stuff, just that hyper local that nobody else will know except you, because you're plugged into the planning commission, or you attend, your local council meetings and really understand what they're trying to do citywide. Those are some cool opportunities specifically in the commercial space that I don't think enough people talk about.
That's great advice. And you're right. Denver has been regarded, it's sort of a joke that, the unofficial city bird or the state bird is the crane. And we're not talking about the large white crane, but yeah, we have had so much growth in Denver, and that's happened over several different evolutions over different decades. We've seen different growth. So it's a great point. And as a commercial broker, getting ahead of that and really understanding it is a huge benefit. I think that data is one of those things that, frankly, for a realtor can sometimes scare us. And the reason for that is I think that there's a lot of very effective, high producing agents that tend to be more communicators. They tend to be more kind of wide open, expressives, and maybe not analytical.
Mm.
And I think that there are some in our industry that, of course, are analytical and tend to sell from a strength of data. And so I think that it's really important if you felt like data tends to confuse you and you're not really sure what side of it to be on. Property Radar could be a very good resource for you. Obviously, if you're out there hustling and making things happen and want to get ahead of some of your rivals that are in the space, being able to contact consumers directly, I think is a huge benefit. So thanks for sharing all those different things, Aaron. I reserve a few personal questions for the end of our show. And as I look at the time, it's always amazing how fast it goes. Before we do that, how do people reach out to Property Radar? How do they get in touch with you and learn more about your subscription service, learn more about your 3-day trial, the communities? How can they get in touch and start to work with you?
If you ever get stuck in the data, you can always email me at aaron@propertyradar.com. I'd be glad to help. But we have a great free community. You don't have to be a customer. It's community.propertyradar.com. If you post a question there, it's me that's going to answer you. And if you get stuck, sometimes I just create a quick video, show you how to find things. It can be a little intimidating. The tool is rather intense. It's used by a lot of hardcore professionals that, there's a lot of data. So don't get lost. Just ask questions. And there's a free 3-day trial. So you sign up so you can sort of play with it, give yourself enough time to really dig in, book a one-on-one with the support team. Sometimes a 15-minute phone call will just set you up. You just need to know exactly what you're trying to find to back into your niche, and you'll be set for life. That's what happened to me 7 years ago. I was just like, where is this? And this possible? I never called their support team again until I joined the team. So
All right, let's
glad to
share
help.
that email one more time.
Aaron, AARON, @propertyradar.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Okay, you ready for our last two questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. I think that this is going to be a lot of fun based on what we've already talked about. So the first question of these two is this concept of Dear Younger Me. It comes from a song that I really like. And the author of the song is writing a letter to themselves, sort of sharing their highs and lows, the mistakes they've made. And it's sort of this beautiful discussion of this is what I would have done with the knowledge that I have now. But at the same time, it's sort of like the concept of God bless the broken road. At some point we're going to have some things that happen, and you have to learn from those and pivot and make some changes and calibrate to a better productive outcome. But I always like to say, this is the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. So as someone that learned a lot from their dad, but then also someone now that's lived some life, and you may have someone in their 20s that wants to learn more about how to be effective with data or other different things, what's the advice that you wish you knew when you were 22, and or how do you share with someone that's younger, that's in their 20s, that's just getting their start on things that they should think about in the world of business?
Um, my biggest The thing I wish I would have known at 22 is about goal writing. Actually, it was a few years at that conference. I did dinner with Josh Dorkin. He's the founder of Bigger Pockets. We've been friends for a long time, and he referred a book called Miracle Morning, and it was about setting aside time for you early in the morning to focus on the things. And at the same moment in time, a few years ago, I was turned on to actually have it in front of me, the Full Focus Planner, where I completely went non-tech. I teach technology, and what I learned is that when I was 22, this wasn't as much of a problem because back then in the dinosaur ages, it wasn't as much of a distraction. And now it was becoming toxic for me. It was the constant buzzing. It was the constant distraction, the email notifications. Um, I wrote every quarter. I fill out a new one of these. My goals are in the front and I have to rewrite them, why that goal is important, the steps I'm going to get to make that happen, and what I'm going to get as a reward when I get there. I wish I would have known the power of goal writing. And I have to say, my dad told me, he tried to turn me on to Tony Robbins when I was 18. I'm like, oh, Dad, I'm going to be a Broadway star, not a real estate mogul. So goal writing will help you pull the trigger faster, because that was going to be my second, is just go for it. But sometimes it's writing the goal and getting very clear about what you want and why, your why, makes that much easier.
Yeah, the purpose behind a goal, what's driving you to really want that, to achieve it, to have that thing that you haven't had before, it is definitely the hidden process that's really important. I've got to ask a follow-up question before I ask the last question, because I'm a avid learner. I love achievers. I love people who've done things, and I am an avid goal setter. But I've often struggled after achieving something great, setting my next goal. But then also every now and again, you set that goal that's a little bit, it's a stretch goal. It's as Jim Collins says, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it may take you a couple of cycles of goal writing, whether it's a couple of years or a couple of quarters or whatever it is, where you feel like you're nearly missing that goal and then you finally get to it. Are there some shared thoughts that you have about both of those concepts of, how do you constantly strive towards that goal, but then also the reluctance of writing the next goal once you've achieved that big, hairy, audacious goal?
It's scary. It's happened twice now where I've written goals, and it's happened much faster than I thought. So I don't know if it just triggers something in my brain. I get really focused or very clear on the path to get there, or I put it out in the ether and magically it's just, I don't know. Um, Chunking it off a piece at a time and getting clear on the goal and the steps to get there, just some reason it's easier step by step to get there if you're clear. If it's just one of those things every January 1st, you're like, that would be fun. Probably not going to happen if it's just not written down. It's not a clear goal. Um, Part of the Miracle Morning, there's this acronym, SAVERS. It's, and it involves affirmations and visualizations and reading and writing, um, really backing into your goals, educating yourself, figuring out how to get there, how to reach those goals. And if you're not setting aside time, that's part of the magic of Miracle Morning, is setting time to actually focus on the things that you say you want to do instead of what other people want you to do.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about technology, is that a lot of our email and our correspondence is largely someone else's to-do list that they're hoping that you can help them accomplish. And so I think being able to set that time, and it's important, in the morning before all of the other craziness happens in our daily lives. That book by Hal Elrod, Miracle Morning, and then there's also an iteration that we've actually had the real estate author of Jay Kinder that did the Miracle Morning for real estate agents. Those are both great resources. We'll put links to those in our show notes. Aaron, our last question is actually an answer to the question that you just answered. So, one of our guests, a former coach of mine, and I alluded to him, Chris Oakley, was on our show in episode 5. Now, a brief little story about Chris. Chris and I became real close, became very friendly. We're real similar in age. And Chris actually tragically passed away about a year ago in a hunting accident. And so this has now become a tribute to Chris's legacy. When he answered that question that I gave, that dear younger me question, he answered it with the fact that he was in this 20s something mentoring group. The leader of the group said, guys, you got to read The Principle of the Path by Andy Stanley. In that book, Andy Stanley has his reader write their own obituary. Now, writing your own obituary feels a little bit more like, maybe a newspaper person or online periodical writing it on your behalf, but maybe not knowing you. So I like to offer, maybe it's a eulogy. And you shared about your dad. And I don't think that was what you were trying to do, but you shared some of the things that made your dad really your hero. And what I heard in there is a lot of things that you'd want to hear in someone's eulogy, of just why someone was important and why they mattered and why they were a great impact, and their hustle and their spirit of gratitude and all these different things. So all of that to say, if you were to have a loved one deliver your eulogy, and this is a question of legacy, what would you hope you'd be remembered by?
Just service. Um, I think, I don't know if it's just my arts background. It's very hard to describe what it's like, giving of yourself with a bunch of people on stage and helping an audience, sometimes full of thousands of people, escape and emote and feel joy. And I never thought that that would translate into the business world. And I can't tell you, like in my MBA class at UC Irvine over a decade ago, I was one of only 3 creatives that were there, and I did great. I love what our industry allows us to bring to the party. You can come from anywhere and you can find a home in real estate. And that aspect of service has continued here, by producing content, teaching our industry about data, being an advocate for our industry about how important home ownership is and what we bring to the table. It's been fun. So service is what I want to be known most for, and making differences in people's lives.
Oh, it's a beautiful answer. And I've never actually had it communicated that way because I've never had someone on the show that's had, the production and theater and acting background. And that's a really cool way to look at it, that when you're collaborating as a group and you're bringing this benefit to an audience and it creates this emotion and everybody has a different feeling. If you've ever been on Broadway, and we hope we can all get back to that at some point, but any of your favorite movies or your favorite book or whatever it is that a creative person might put together, it really brings you to that place and gives you this spirit of joy and happiness. So Aaron, I appreciate that answer because I've never had that question answered that way, and that's why I like to ask it, because we get all sorts of different things. So thank you.
Good, thanks.
All right. So we're at the end of our show. Time for a couple of shout outs and a few reminders. So if you like everything that Aaron Norris has been communicating, make sure to check out Property Radar. Obviously, you can do it for free, but they obviously grow by having subscribers. And I know that they can benefit someone out there that's listening, someone that's trying to calibrate their business to a better outcome. I'd love to say thank you to our podcast producer, Ann Russell, for booking the show. And it's a great reminder that this show grows by 5-star reviews, specifically on Apple Podcasts is where we're looking for. So if you can drop a 5-star review, if you love this interview, specifically say something about Aaron. We do read that content. We do appreciate it. We actually got 2 amazing reviews on the last episode that we did. And we know that we're hearing you out there. We're hearing from people like Jay and Holly, the 2 people that both communicated to me directly saying this show matters. And I loved all the different concepts that you shared last week. So if you enjoyed the show, please bless Aaron by saying that. And of course, if you can share it on social media, we'd be greatly appreciative. So for Aaron Norris, I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and I love to say this, and I say it every time. We will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody.